Well, grace and peace. The Lord bless you, everybody. Hop in and hop on. Join us tonight here on we're on Instagram, we're streaming on Facebook, and we are on YouTube. And so, whatever platform you are watching from, if you will hit the share button and tag 3 people in the comments as we get into tonight's conversation. Grace and peace to you. The Lord bless you, everybody. Trust everybody has had a great day. Right, Facebook, I see that you're on. Again, hit the share button for us and tag somebody in the comments. Let them know that we are on live. We've got a couple of things we're going to get into tonight and discuss tonight. Great conversation. It's going to start us off. We're going to talk a little bit about grooming. And then after that, we have some updates we are going to share with you. Some updates we're going to share with you about one of the cases that Safehouse has been handling there in Des Moines, Iowa, and a default judgment, and some other updates for you. So we're going to wait about 60 more seconds. If you are watching the replay, you probably want to hit the share, fast forward rather a little bit as we give people just a few minutes to log in and to join us tonight. We've been getting messages. People have been reaching out, wondering what's going on and what's next. And so we want to bring you all into that. And again, we want to talk tonight about grooming, what that looks like, how that happens within the church context. So go ahead as you're coming in and share and hit the like button for us and tag a few people that will join us. Those of you all that have been following Safehouse Unmuzzled for a couple of years, you all know that one of the very first cases we began handling came out of Des Moines, Iowa, and a 63-year-old pastor. Thank you, LMSYT. Let me also do that. Let me thank the vloggers who have from the beginning been intentional about raising awareness. Keisha, grace and peace. I sent you a message today, Keisha. I was trying to get you into this conversation. Grace and peace, everybody that's coming in. If I missed your comment, forgive me. We've got a bunch of different screens going on. But those of you all that have been following, you know, one of the very first cases that Safehouse began investigating and really publishing was a case of a 63-year-old bishop who married a teenage lifelong member of his church who had been a student in the school that he is the dean of, and or was published to be the dean of. I don't know if he's still the dean, and had been reported to have been receiving counseling from him. And when we began getting people reaching out to us about it, we immediately went through some of our processes and began investigating, came into the city, began raising awareness. One of the things I want to start tonight, for those of you all that are new to our work and what it is that we do, Safehouse Unmuzzled is an advocacy group incorporated in the state of Texas. We advocate for victims and survivors of gross clergy abuse and predatory clergy sexual misconduct. Specifically, within the African American church context. We work to raise awareness around issues of significant misuses of power within the church. And we are, again, committed to this work, a work that several other communities have representation in. However, in the Black church, in particular, the Black charismatic and Pentecostal church, a lot of these abuses are so woven into the tapestry of the culture that we don't see them as abuses, or when we see them, we have been conditioned to, quote unquote, leave it to God, pray about it, etc. When we talk about gross clergy abuse, gross clergy abuse is the blatant and overt and extreme violation of a person in order to take advantage of him or her. It is the deliberate victimization of a person by a member of the clergy whose spiritual authority that person is under. And predatory clergy sexual misconduct is any sexualized behavior by a church or spiritual leader towards someone under his or her spiritual care or authority, who by nature is in a position of less power and authority. And in such a situation, the clergy member, the pastor, the spiritual father, mother becomes a fiduciary, and the member becomes an emotional support or dependent. One of the things, and we'll get some into this in our talk with our guest tonight, who will bring on in just a minute, Dr. Diane Langberg, who is one of the leading authorities on this conversation of gross clergy abuse and predatory clergy sexual misconduct. In her book, Redeeming Power, she said that understanding authority and abuse in the church means that consent that is given under manipulation or under coercion is not true consent, that the inherent power imbalance in the clergy congregant relationship means that what appears as consent is often compliance out of fear, obligation, confusion, or a sense of indebtedness. And so we began doing this work back in 2021 in the midst of the pandemic, and Clubhouse at the time was the poppin' app, and while everybody was on lockdown, we were having conversations. At the same time, there was a sense of awakening, a sense of social awakening and awareness of some of these things that have been going on within the church. And when God put it in our spirit to begin and incorporate the organization to really step in to try to help fill in the gap in our community on behalf of victims and survivors, men and women from around the country begin to commit themselves, partner with us in the work. We have a phenomenal board of directors that aid us in governing and ensuring checks and balances remain in place. We have an executive committee, and we'll hear from Bree tonight and talk a little bit about that part of the work. And so right before we bring up Dr. Tiyahri Wilson, I want to play for us just a piece of a statement made by Jordan Goodlett, who is the teenager that married or is married to the 63, well, I guess he's older than that now, the grandfather and pastor of Christ Apostolic Temple. Many people have asked, well, what did or does her family have to say? And so I want you all to hear from her biological grandfather, her father's father.
That Jordan's father, James Goodlett, sold his daughter out, pimped his daughter out for his own reasons, for his own earthly reasons. And I can tell you what they are, but that's not important. Because when you make the moves and make the decision to put your daughter in the situation that she is now, and he deliberately did it. You need to understand that this was a constructed movement by he and this pastor that went on for more than a year. Set this young lady up for over a year.
And I want you to hear one more piece, and then we'll go into just a broader conversation about grooming in the church at large. I want you to hear another part of Mr. James Belcher, his thoughts on this.
If this is something she wanted to do, but we know she was crying out. She was in tears. She didn't want to do it. And when we found out the Saturday before the marriage, the Saturday before, all of us were stunned. I'm calling you from Chicago, from the Chicago area. Jordan's in Des Moines. Her mother and Jordan's two younger sisters are in Louisiana, just outside of Shreveport. So we're scattered. And when we got word on Saturday afternoon that this wedding was about to happen, we were scrambling to try to figure out what it was we could do, what we could do to put this to an end. And I have two sons in their 30s. And we were thinking that if we have to go to this wedding and stand in the middle of it, we will do that. But understand, that wedding took place the following Monday afternoon. Who gets married on Monday?
So again, you've heard it in the voice of the teenage bride's grandfather, her father's father, um, and his words were that she did not want to. This brings us to a broader conversation tonight that I want us to have about what is grooming. What does grooming look like? How does grooming work? What is the psychological and perhaps psychosocial impact of grooming? Because a lot of people um, are confused about it with an assumption that if someone is an adult, or is if someone is an adult, or if someone is seemingly compliant, that there must not be any grooming. So we want to talk about grooming tonight, the culture in the church. I asked my good friend, Dr. Tiyahri Wilson, the founder of Therapy University. She is a psychologist and a minister, a prophetess also in the church. And so we wanted to invite her to come on. Dr. Tiyahri, thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bishop. I appreciate the invitation.
So, Dr. Tiyahri, you and I have had other conversations just around what grooming is and how grooming works. So, just kind of explain to us, what is grooming?
Yeah, Bishop. So essentially, I feel like you did a good job of kind of defining it earlier, but essentially, it is a process of manipulation. And typically, when we see grooming taking place, it happens in three parts. The first part is that the groomer seeks to acquire access or to gain access to the victim. The second part is to establish some form of trust, some false sense of trust and safety. And then third, it is to exert some measure of control over them so that they can carry out whatever their personal plan or desires are concerning the individual that they have specifically targeted.
I see. And one of the, I think, obvious key mechanisms of grooming,
Mhm.
whether it is, of course, tonight we're talking about within the context of the church, but
Mhm.
whether it's in church, the corporate environment, a
Mhm.
school setting, a counselor's office, one of the primary mechanisms is there has to be a position of influence and control. How does, in your view, how does some of the culture within the African American church, especially again the charismatic and the Pentecostal church, where we have, we make almost stars of
Yeah.
our leaders, and we hear our leaders always as the voice of God, and
Mhm.
especially if a leader uses those words, God said.
Mhm.
How does that culture lend itself to grooming?
Yeah, I would say absolutely in the charismatic spaces that the power dynamics are substantially weighty as it relates to the person or the individual who has who's in the position of authority. And as you stated, because that person, especially if they're any kind of leader that holds a title, is held to such high regard, and their authority is almost equated to hearing the voice of God, right? We almost in these spaces give it the same weight that we give to God himself, right? It's almost as though if they said, God said, then we believe. We've been trained and taught many times, right? Because I'm a charismatic girl, grew up in
Sure.
Pentecostalism and apostolic spaces. That this is the word of the Lord, this is the will of the Lord, or that this thing, whatever this instruction or direction is, that it is automatically approved by God. So the power dynamics are profoundly weighty for the person that's in the position of authority. And so oftentimes, and I know that we'll talk more about this later, when we look at moral disengagement, we see those euphemistic labelings, right? Spiritual father, counselor, mentor, sponsor. And we put so much weight on these labels and so much weight and give so much authority and power to these individuals that it's very, very difficult for a person to kind of make decisions outside of weighing those decisions on what this person in authority has said, required, or desired. So
Mhm.
it's substantial.
Yeah, and again, I think because it is so woven into just the tapestry of our church culture, this
Mhm.
imbalance of power,
Absolutely.
where in many of our churches, I will go as far as to say that our church leadership structures do not look like the leadership structures that we see within the book of Acts and the development of the church, where there was a plurality of leadership to ensure were checks and balances. That
Mhm.
while indeed there was always a senior leader, primus inter pares, or first among equal,
Mhm.
elders in the New Testament church in the book of Acts did not serve just as some decoration on a front
Mhm.
row.
Mhm.
Elders in the New Testament church were not yes men and or yes women. Elders in the New Testament church actually had a responsibility to aid in maintaining the balance. And I know some of you all
Absolutely.
see Dwight Reed in the comments. I'm not even going to block him yet. I want you all to see how he engages and judge and assess for yourself. You mentioned moral disengagement, and it
Yes.
is something that I talk about often because when conversations around grooming, when conversations around, just over the last week, we've seen an explosion
Yes.
even online.
Yes.
Pastor Robert Morris out
Mhm.
of Dallas, a woman came forward to talk about the sexual abuse
Mhm.
that she endured at 12 years old.
Yeah.
And Pastor Robert Morris took to the pulpit and said that he had a quote unquote inappropriate relationship
Mm.
and affair with a young woman. And so
Mhm.
when we talk about moral disengagement, define for us what is moral disengagement.
Yeah, so moral disengagement essentially is a groomer's way of removing any kind of guilt or shame or kind of nullifying themselves from any wrongdoing as it relates to the grooming behavior, to the inappropriate or abusive behavior, right? It's a way to kind of maintain a moral high standing. It is a way to kind of shift blame, right? Whether it's to other individuals in authority or those who may have been aware of the conduct or behavior, or it is in some way just their way of, again, absolving themselves of any moral or ethical wrongdoing. So there are many, many methods in which we see this. And in most cases where you see grooming behavior, there will be one of these one or more of these 8 behaviors that are also present, because what the groomer essentially seeks to do is to justify the behavior so that they are not to blame or found guilty of any wrongdoing.
And I think even beyond just the groomers efforts to cause a disengagement, in the broader sense, the way our community at large, where there is mass grooming that
Yes.
goes on, and
Yeah.
then there is mass moral disengagement
Mhm.
that significantly undermines both ethical behaviors and undermines by creating cognitive justifications
Mhm.
for the unethical actions, that where
Yeah.
a person is a man or woman of God, that where a person is a pastor, a leader,
Yeah.
we automatically assume that everything they say God said, he
Yeah.
must have said,
Mhm.
even where there are things that obviously breach ethical boundaries. And then church people
Right.
will come to either a defense or turn their head
Mhm.
because they have morally disengaged. What are
Yeah.
those 8 mechanisms?
Yeah, I want to talk about those 8 mechanisms, Bishop, but I also want to talk about how, when you talk about the mass grooming, how very real that is. When we look at how the church uses scripture oftentimes to absolve leadership of the moral responsibilities, saying things such as, touch not mine anointed, do my prophet no harm, how the scriptures are often used to give a pass or to justify certain behaviors, or to silence individuals who may have had certain experiences, inappropriate, abusive, neglectful, harmful experiences with individuals who are in leadership and ministry spaces, as a means of protecting them. So this community grooming, this mass grooming, is also a very real part of the culture and extremely dangerous. But when we look at the 8 moral disengagements, right, that came from Dr. Bandura, the first one that we typically see, again, is what we talked about earlier. It's a moral justification. That's the first one, right? It is essentially where someone may say something like, this was the will of the Lord. They may even use a scripture such as, whom God has put together, what God has put together, let no man put asunder. This was the doing of the Lord, right? Trying to over spiritualize the bad behavior or the inappropriate behavior, actions, or decision making. So moral justification typically is what we see first. We talked just a moment ago about the euphemistic labeling, right? Which is where when the groomer comes into the life or into the space of the individual that they seek to groom, they come in as a spiritual counselor or as a pastor or a deacon or a leader of some kind in the ministry, who is kind of automatically given a certain level of trust and credibility. And there's an expected level of safety there that automatically exists for most people, because we say, this is a man of God. This is a woman of God. They're not going to do me any harm. They're here to help, right? So we see this labeling, and what this labeling does is, oftentimes when it is a groomer, it, one, gives automatic access, or oftentimes access. 2, it's going to create that false sense of safety and trust that allows the groomer to execute whatever plan they're intending on executing. And then we have what we call advantageous comparison, right? So oftentimes when the groomer is held into account, when they are confronted, they're oftentimes going to use some extreme example of someone else who did something else that's not even related to the behavior that we are calling into question, because again, they want to absolve themselves of any and all accountability or any and all wrongdoing as it relates to their behavior. So we may be talking about, for example, the case that you've mentioned tonight, and someone may say, well, this isn't Jim Jones. We're not asking people to drink Kool-Aid. We're not. And when you look at that, you would say, my God, one has nothing to do with the other, right? So essentially, it's a way of manipulating and redirecting so that the individual, so that the groomer is not held into account. And then there's two other things as it relates to responsibility. Okay, we have the displacement of responsibility, right, which is essentially where the responsibility for the groomer's behavior is shifted onto other people. And then there is the diffusion of responsibility where it is shared. So in both of these cases, it's about the groomer removing responsibility for themselves, from themselves, excuse me. They made something like, hey, this is not my fault. This was allowable. My board okayed it. No one spoke up. No one said anything. Everybody was okay with it. The people that I'm accountable to didn't say anything. So there must not be anything wrong with what I've done because the people around me, again, this is where we begin to see that mass grooming come into place again. No one has said anything. And then we have a disregard or a distortion of consequences. What does that mean? The groomer is not concerned about how their behavior, what the implications are for the victim, long-term or short-term. They just simply do not care. They are fixated on their own plan, on their own agenda, self-serving, right? Whatever it is that they seek to gain from the inappropriate relationship, that's all they care about. They are not concerned about the individual and how their behavior, how their decision-making impacts them. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we see as it relates to the seventh moral disengagement, which is dehumanization. And most people know what dehumanization means, right? In this case, it is where they dehumanize the person. The person becomes the object of their lust or their fantasy or their desire or whatever it is that they seek to get out of it. They don't care. They don't see them as a person, but instead they see them as an object. I want this person. I'm going to have this person. I'm going to go after this person. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what people say. I don't care if it ruins them mentally, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, financially. I don't care if it destroys their self-image or self-esteem. I don't care what it does to them. I want what I want and I'm going to have it. And so that's where the dehumanization comes in at. And then finally, when we look at the attribution of blame, that's essentially where the groomer takes all the blame off themselves and they put it on the victim. They were interested in me. They were giving me a look. They came on to me. I knew they wanted me. They said to me, oh, I wonder what it would be like to be, whatever kind of delusional thinking oftentimes that has come into place that causes them to believe that they are not responsible for their role or the abuse of the power dynamic that brought this thing into fruition. So
and so let me ask you this last question behind that. What then is the effect on the person or persons that are groomed? That seem to comply, go along with, whether we're talking about this mass kind of grooming of whole churches and whole communities or an individual in particular?
Yeah, so the implications are typically going to be different for children versus adults, but even for groups, but there's also some intersectionality there, right? So first and foremost, one of the implications is that it creates distrust, right? First, it causes individuals to question their ability to trust themselves, to trust their own decision-making. It causes them to cause them to question their experiences, right? So kind of like what you see with gaslighting. Did that really happen? Was that really my experience? Did they really say that? Was that really what they meant when pastor or whomever stood up and said what he said today? Did I hear what he was saying? Did he say that what I believed that he said? And so it causes some distrust and it causes some questioning and some self-doubt immediately. Oftentimes we also see an increase, a substantial increase in mental illness diagnoses to follow after this grooming has occurred. So we're talking about depression and anxiety, many times PTSD. That is extremely common to see PTSD in victims who have been groomed because of the trauma of their experience. Oftentimes when they're coming out of these things, if they're fortunate enough to do so, they're saying to themselves, Did that really happen to me? When we look at it on a mass level, if you consider people who may have come out of certain churches or ministries where there was a great deal of grooming or church abuse, people are saying, I can't believe I stayed for as long as I stayed. I can't believe I allowed that person, that leader, to do that to me, to humiliate me in that way, to shame me, to guilt me, to cause me to dislike myself in such a way because I was trying to please them, seeking their affirmation or their validation. So there's a lot that happens as it relates to mental and emotional well-being, short-term and long-term, for the victim or victims of someone who has been groomed. We also see where they have very extreme difficulties in interpersonal relationships. If they are fortunate enough to be able to remove themselves from those situations and move forward, they have a hard time trusting their partners. They question everything. They question motives. They question themselves. They're not sure how to establish healthy boundaries because oftentimes the way that the groomers gain access to their victims is that their victims didn't do the best job of establishing healthy boundaries. Perhaps it's a skill they didn't have, perhaps they'd never been taught, or perhaps they felt that they did not have the authority to establish those boundaries because of the power dynamic, because they were dealing with someone who was in a position of authority. So when we look at those implications, what is it really about? How do people find themselves as victims of grooming? Oftentimes, it's related to their fear of rejection. It is related to a need for acceptance, a need for approval, right? And it speaks to a lot of self-doubt or uncertainty, right? And also people who typically lean more towards people-pleasing seem to fall into those situations of grooming. So the implications, I could go on and on, Bishop, about what we see and what we continue to see. But what I will say is that oftentimes the effects, the implications of them can last for a lifetime.
Wow. Wow. Those of you that are watching, hit the share button. Somebody in your community, in your reach, needs to watch this and hear, because often this is all too common within our communities and within our church. And Dr. Tiyahri, if a person has experienced that and then finds themselves, I was watching a documentary on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, Dancing for the Devil, TikTok dance cult.
Yeah.
I was watching it the other day. Those of you all online, if you haven't watched it, go and watch it. And a lot of these people, victims that came out, one of the things they find great shame in is that they once protected and felt indebted to protect and felt like they loved the leader. I can't remember the guy's name on the do you remember his name on the show? I can't remember his name. So what happens that causes a person who has been abused or has been groomed to form some sense of affinity, duty towards their abuser?
You know, the abusers or the groomers are masters of exploitation. So typically they are looking for an opportunity to gain access. And many, many times they gain access during periods of crisis, times of great need. So let's just say, for example, if an individual has some kind of like a food insecurity or a housing insecurity, or they're grieving the loss of a loved one, or they've just relocated and they're new to a space and they feel all alone and they're trying to establish a sense of community, develop a community. These are great opportunities for exploitation in the minds and heart of someone who's seeking to groom, someone who's seeking to abuse or manipulate someone who is in need. So the reason that these individuals typically feel indebted to them is because in their mind, it's almost as though their groomer has rescued them or come to their aid or they were the person who showed up for me when no one else was there, or they were the person who met a need for me that no one else could meet. And so there's oftentimes we see not only does the groomer meet the need, but they constantly remind the victim of how they showed up for them or how they met them. And so through that, they use it as a method to kind of isolate them from all the other voices in their life, all the other people who love and care about them, any other possible voice of authority, so that they can have the greatest influence in that person's ear. And they use how they showed up for them or what they did for them to justify why they should have this kind of weight and authority, why they should have this kind of access, and why everybody else should kind of be discounted. Because remember, they didn't show up for you when you needed them to, like I did. It was me. I prayed for you. When you lost your grandmother, it was me. I was at the funeral. Remember, it was me. I was there. I paid your light bill, or I helped you, or I bought your school supplies, whatever it is that they can use, right, to leverage their influence in the life of the victim. That is what they do, leaving them feeling a constant sense of indebtedness to their groomers.
Wow. Wow. Dr. Tiyahri, thank you. Tell everybody how they can find you online and how they can find your work.
Yeah. So I'm online here, right here on Facebook at Tiyahri Wilson. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Tiyahri, and the same thing on YouTube. I'm going to try to do more to improve and increase my presence, to have more conversations like these, so that I can continue to help with doing the work to heal our communities.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dr. Tiyahri Wilson. We appreciate you sharing with us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bishop.
Those of you all that are just coming on, we were just talking with Dr. Tiyahri Wilson just about grooming within our church culture, and just within community, our communities at large. And she gave some wonderful insight. If you missed that, you will want to watch it again from the beginning. We want to get now into the second part of our conversation and talk about the civil case in Des Moines, Iowa, with the person some of you all see just in the comments, can't help himself. Before we move forward, if y'all want us to block him, let us know, and we'll block him out of the chat. It does not, this is not new to me. So if y'all want us to block him, y'all put in the comments, block him, and we'll do that so we can. I wish there was a way just to shut his comments down. All right, do that, and we'll do that. All right, so back in the matter of fact, before we go again and get into this, I want to one more time let you all hear the words of Jordan Goodlet Reed's grandfather himself, because many of you all asked about what her family had to say and where her family was. So let you all hear that.
That Jordan's father, James Goodlet, sold his daughter out, pimped his daughter out for his own reasons, for his own earthly reasons. And I can tell you what they are, but that's not important. Because when you make the moves and make the decision to put your daughter in the situation that she is now, and he deliberately did it. You need to understand that this was a constructed movement by he and this pastor that went on for more than a year. Set this young lady up for over a year. This is something she wanted to do, but we know she was crying out. She was in tears. She didn't want to do it. And when we found out the Saturday before the marriage, the Saturday before, all of us were stunned. I'm calling you from Chicago, from the Chicago area. Jordan's in Des Moines. Her mother and Jordan's two younger sisters are in Louisiana, just outside of Shreveport. So we're scattered. And when we got word on Saturday afternoon that this wedding was about to happen, we were scrambling to try to figure out what it was we could do, what we could do to put this to an end. And I have two sons in their 30s. And we were thinking that if we have to go to this wedding and stand in the middle of it, we will do that. But understand, that wedding took place the following Monday afternoon. Who gets married on Monday?
So again, you all heard in the voice of Mr. James Belcher, who is the teenage bride's grandfather. And thank you, Kimberly Chandler. I appreciate that. I agree. You heard that for yourself. So, of course, after Safehouse began using our platform to raise awareness, to allow victims to speak out, I believe it was two, I don't know if it was all three, but at least two of Dwight Reed's three ex-wives came on and talked and said that he had abused them. He had just a whole gamut of things. A lot of that audio is online. Again, thank you to some of the bloggers and vloggers that captured the audio. And because a lot of content creators now have been, getting it. Awareness is key. And they came and spoke out for themselves. We then assigned case managers. Here's the thing that a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people, some people just don't understand about the work that Safehouse Unmuzzled does. Though I serve Safehouse as the executive director, there are numerous people who all of us volunteer our time, our resources. None of us have ever received a dime for any of the work that we do or have done. We have self-funded. I have personally donated thousands of dollars to this work, loaned money to the organization at the with the approval of our board of directors. One of the things that has been misrepresented numerous times by Dwight Reed, even in legal court documents, and we're going to get into these court documents, and we're only going to be on for about 15 more minutes, so y'all hang out with us, is that this is a Bishop Sinegal fundraising machine. Those of y'all that have been following us for some time, you all know that several of the cases we were handling in 2021 and 2022, we published all of the financial reports of donations that either were received or were not received, and monies that were spent, and it was never in the surplus. This type of work, advocacy, is not about personal allurement. It's not about personal advancement. It is about using the strength, voice, platform, and influence that we have in order to give voice to the voiceless, where so many voiceless people have been told to do this. Can y'all see the face? To be quiet. We are intentionally using ours to give voice to the voiceless. What many people are often confused about is, though yes, I am a pastor, and yes, I am an itinerant speaker, and yes, I am a preacher of the gospel, Safehouse Unmuzzled is not a church. And when I do this work as the executive director of Safehouse Unmuzzled, I'm doing this work as an advocate who happens to be a pastor and a bishop, because more often than not, these cries for accountability come from without the church. People who were in it, got hurt in it, and left it. And it serves us an injustice and does us a disservice when there are no voices within the church that are speaking to it. So nonetheless, you all know we've kept you all abreast from day number one. Dwight Reed filed a lawsuit against Safehouse, against me as an individual, and against the church that I pastor, the Kingdom Church, which is completely unrelated to this. Again, I don't speak in this regard as the pastor of the Kingdom Church, but as the executive director of Safehouse Unmuzzled. And he filed a lawsuit. The attorney that represented us at the time filed to have the lawsuit removed to federal court because I live in Texas. Safehouse is incorporated in Texas, and the Kingdom Church is incorporated in Texas. Filed to have it removed there. It was sent back to district court in December of this past year. The attorney that was representing us at the time got hired on to a new law firm, and there was an additional retainer that law firm was requiring that Safehouse simply was unable to meet. And so our attorney filed to withdraw from the case in December, or maybe it was November, December, filed to withdraw from the case. In December, there was a deadline for answers to be filed. Again, at that time, we were still represented by our initial counsel. Unbeknownst to us, incomplete answers were filed in the district court. Apparently, answers had been filed in the federal court, but not once it was sent back or removed to the district court. In March, apparently there was a status hearing in the month of March that I was unaware of, and the board of Safehouse empowered me to act on its behalf in these proceedings. Same with the Kingdom Church. One of our board members is currently a sitting judge. We thought it best not to have him on tonight so as to not allow any opportunity for someone to, in particular, Dwight Reed and his folk, to attempt to create conflict for him. However, at every step, Judge Coleman has spoken with and was working with us along with the attorney to kind of advise. I did not know about the hearing in the month of March, and so we missed it. The opposing counsel filed a motion for a default judgment. There was a hearing in the month of April. I got notification of it. I attended the hearing virtually in order to, at the advice of counsel, we filed a motion for continuance and filed a motion to appear virtually. The motion to appear virtually was granted, but the motion for a continuance to allow us to retain new counsel was not granted. I shared with you all in the month of April on our page that the judge in that case granted a default. However, he did not issue an order for default judgment until this past Tuesday, I believe, June the 18th. A default judgment, here's what I want to make clear to us tonight, and then I want to tell you what's going to happen next. Dwight Reed is in the comments and is on his social media page wanting to create the image, and I'm sure he'll tell it to the people who attend his church, wanting to make you all believe that a trial was had where testimony was given and it was found that I was lying. I've never met the man a day in my life. Dwight Reed is not a blip on my radar. I don't know him. My first time even interacting with him was in court in April virtually, where he could not control himself on the stand. I don't know him. I have no personal ought or vendetta with him. He will want you to believe that a judge heard the case and decided that he is a victim of slander and that we were relying on him. That's not what happened. That's not what a default judgment is. Now, a default judgment can be set aside. Dwight Reed is in the comments talking about some run him his $690,000. Here's what I would tell you all. Dwight Reed will never see a dime of any of that. New counsel will be filing the motion to set aside the default judgment, so that the merits of the case can be litigated in court. Keisha is in the comments. Keisha is one of the therapists who volunteered her time and volunteers her time for the organization, spoke with a lot of the victims. And then Bre'Onna, that's on tonight, is the chairman of the executive committee for the organization. And Bree, just what were some of the things? Because again, we want y'all to be clear. We don't know this man, right? Everything that we have shared and published was what is and was reported,
given to us. We have no idea who he is.
No idea. We don't know him. Again, investigation was done. If you all have not already done so, go to SafeHouseUnmuzzled.com. And if you click on the offender database, there is what's called an Unmuzzled report, where we publish all of the details of we cover the names to protect these people, because one of the things that has been common in this case only, this is the only case that we've handled, that we've had this, is death threats.
Yeah.
Bree, you were telling me just today that one of the victims who spoke out, whose parents were still connected in some kind of way, are still receiving death threats.
Absolutely. And I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I think it's so much to unpack. It's so much.
You're freezing. Are you freezing, Bree, or are you reading?
No, you're talking. I see your mouth moving, and I'm like, is he talking? But I can't hear you while I'm talking.
My camera must be lagging then. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there is so much to unpack here that we do not have time to unpack tonight. It's so funny watching Dwight Reed crash out in the comments. One, we were in Des Moines. He was aware that we were there. If there was any problem or if there was something that he wanted to say while we were there, he had ample opportunity to do so. Just the same way Bishop said, we didn't go looking for him. I didn't even know people lived in Des Moines. I can't even lie to you. So when these things started coming to us, of course, it piqued the interest and we wanted to know. We did talk to several of Jordan's friends that she is no longer friends with. We spoke with family members of Dwight Reed. I think we had the same night that her grandfather was on, I think Dwight's daughter, she spoke about him as well.
I know his biological daughter, his biological niece, former stepdaughter, two ex-wives.
Absolutely. Exactly. So if your daughter, your biological daughter, my father is near and dear to me. There is no way I would ever speak ill of my father. And the way that she spoke, she didn't speak ill of him. However, her disdain for him marrying, I think she was 18 then. an 18-year-old and he is well in his 60s is disgusting. We can say all day long, the judge did this, the judge did that. Let's talk about morally. Morally, when you're sitting, when you get home, Mr. Dwight, since you're on here, so I'm going to speak to you. When you get home from Sunday service and you finish preaching a wonderful word, what do you and Jordan have to talk about? What are you guys, there is no type of common, nothing that you guys have in common. It's sick and it's disgusting. I don't know you personally. However, I have seen certain text messages and certain this and certain that between certain individuals that it has everything to do with you. So nobody is lying on you. I would never diminish or say that one person and their experience and the violation of you is wrong or it's a lie. I would never do that because I don't think everybody's stories concerning you, Mr. Dwight, is the same. Everybody's story when it comes to you, whether it's male or female, is the same about who you are. The fact of the matter is she was raised in your ministry. She went to the school that your ministry runs. While she was in the school, you sat on the board of the school and you married her. That's the facts.
Those are indeed the facts. You all are free to Google default judgment because Dwight is still in the comments saying that now we're lying about the definition of a default judgment. And then you all can Google motion to set aside default judgment. And so we look forward to the day in court where...
Wait a minute, Bishop. I asked him as well. I asked him, what are we lying about? That's what I want to know. I want to know, what is the lie?
Well, I'm not, he can go and talk about that on his page and platform. There's no lies that have been told here. Again, new counsel will be filing the motion to set aside the default. There's a 60-day window from the day an order for default judgment is granted for a motion to set aside the default judgment to be filed and to be considered. And so we look forward to it. Those of you all that have supported Safe House, we appreciate you. Those of you all that have volunteered your time and your work to Safe House and continue to, we appreciate. Many of you all have asked. It seemed like some of that Safe House work came to a halt in the midst of us securing what's called an umbrella insurance policy, knowing that people like this who abuse power also attempt to use the courts to silence advocates, because if advocates get silenced, victims and survivors get muzzled. In the midst of that, we got sued. And if we got sued by 5, 10, 15 people at the same time, it would absolutely cripple us. And so Safe House is still alive and well. We need your help. We need you to donate to the work. Donate to the Legal Defense Fund. We have a board treasurer. Our financials are available for whomever would like to see them. We need your help. We cannot fund this alone. The attorney we spoke with 3 weeks ago required a $50,000 retainer. That's completely outside of our reach. Thankfully, not all of the attorneys are requiring that, but we need your help. So please donate. You can use Cashapp $SafehouseUnmuzzled, or you can go to our GoFundMe page and you can donate there. Don't just share. And again, sharing helps, raising awareness helps, but donate. Don't let us fight by ourselves. We need your support. The link is in the caption to give on GoFundMe. And I appreciate you all. Listen, his grace is sufficient and with us. And Dwight Reed, you all have seen his character for yourselves in the comments. We don't have to tell you anything about it. He showed it for himself. I appreciate you all. As we get ready to get off of here, I want you all to hear one last thing. Social media influencers have been hot about this. And if the world feels this way, the church got to catch up.
Pastor Dwight Reed is married to 19-year-old Jordan and has been in her life since she was 13 years old.
You will see me on the news. Let me just tell you that right now. Talking about what you gonna do if you see her. You better walk by and say, praise the Lord. That's what you better do. Cause that's my wife.
A child.
And she grown.
19. Teenager.
She didn't need nobody to sign no paperwork for her. If this was out in the streets, y'all be saying she made a come up. But you a hypocrite. So don't you forget the Bible say marriage is honorable. And the Bible said when you find a wife, honey, you find favor with God, honey. I found some favor with God. And we sleeping good at night.
Kill me as the black folks in a congregation. That's right. Doing all this. Yes.
If the world can see that this should be concerning, I trust that you saints will also. The Lord bless you all. Thank you again for tuning in. Thanks for your support. Please hit share. Safe House Unmuzzled is committed to ensuring that victims and survivors don't get muzzled by those who try to use the courts to silence advocates. Please again donate tonight. We've got some stuff we got to get done with this new attorney, and we can't do it by ourselves. The Lord bless you all. Have a great night.
Bye.